Hey everybody, my name is Michael. I'm the install tech here at Fabspeed, and today we're going to go over installing both of our catback exhaust systems on the 992 GT3. So here we have our Fabspeed Valvetronic system. Maintains the factory PSC with helical valves imported from the United Kingdom. It also has cast inlets for the mufflers, ensuring maximum flow. And over here we have our Fabspeed Supercup X pipe, which has no valves, but we include simulators to help avoid a check engine light on your Porsche. Okay, so for today's job, it's really just some basic tools. Assorted socket wrenches, extensions, and sockets from 12 to 15 mil. A swivel definitely helps. You're gonna need an E10 and E12 sockets as well for a couple fasteners. An Allen key for the V-band clamps. Some power tools definitely help. Some 13 mil spanners, 22 spanner, and a torque wrench for the header nuts. So the first step of the job is to get the car up in the air. We're going to use a lift here, but you could also use ramps or jack stands if you want to do this at home. So now that we're here under the GT3, we're going to pull our rear diffuser off so we can see what we're working with. So there is a bit of an order in which you want to remove the 5T30 bolts. I like to start by getting the ones on the front corner. Then I'll move on to the back ones. You only need to loosen these by a few threads. I'll show you why in a second. And then finally, we're gonna remove the center one up front. And with that out, we're gonna take the whole diffuser here and just slide it back right off the car. Now we've got our diffuser off, we're gonna go ahead and unplug the valves. All right, so unfortunately, in order to remove the OEM muffler, we do have to take the headers out, but it's not that much work and really doesn't require any fancy tools, so we'll get it done. We're gonna go ahead and remove this heat shield here. It's held on by 3 E10 bolts. Up next, we're gonna remove our 402 sensors. On some Porsches, this can be kind of a pain, but the GT3 makes it very, very easy. You can remove them all with just a plain 22 millimeter wrench. With our O2 sensors out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and loosen the 2 V-band clamps connecting the cat and the muffler. They're held on by a 6 millimeter Allen key and should come right out. Sometimes the clamps themselves can be a little stubborn. You can just give them a little pop with a screwdriver or a pry bar or anything you got laying around. Next, we're gonna go ahead and break loose all the nuts for the header. You can go ahead and take them all out. The headers will still be supported by the bracket connecting the cat to the transmission. It is very important to break these loose by hand, just to make sure everything's moving nice and smoothly. And then you can go ahead and zip them off with an impact or power tool if you'd like. But yes, very important to break them loose by hand. After that, to ease in pulling the headers out, we're gonna loosen these 2 clamps around the muffler. Not totally remove them, just loosen it to help give the muffler a little bit of mobility. Definitely makes life easier. This is also a 6 millimeter Allen key, and yeah, just go ahead and loosen them 3/4 of the way. And the final step before pulling the header out is to get up there with an E12 and get those 2 nuts loose on that bracket. Can be a bit of a tight squeeze, but with loosening the muffler, it really makes life a lot easier. All right, let's drop this muffler. We got our valves disconnected, we got our clamps loosened, we've got our headers out. Go ahead and pop that, and just drop it on down. Now, for some of our international customers, you may have monitored GPFs on the vehicle, so you'll have an additional probe here on the inlet of the muffler. Obviously, you're gonna remove those before pulling anything out of the vehicle, and then put them back in on reinstallation. Next, for our customers installing the Fabspeed Valvetronic exhaust system, we're gonna go ahead and take the servos off the Porsche system and put them on the Fabspeed system. However, if you are doing the Supercup X pipe, you don't need to do this. You can put on the supplied simulators that we'll give you, and you'll be good to go. Make sure you go ahead and mark the valves left and right in regards to which side of the vehicle they came from. When you put it all back together, just go ahead and stick with that side. For putting the valves in the Fabspeed system, we're going to include these little springs. You just go ahead and ensure your valves in the fully open position. Drop the splines of the spring into the valve. And the factory servo just drops right in. Boom. All right, let's throw this muffler in the car. It can be a little cumbersome. It's nice to have a friend, but it's still doable solo. We have our supply backing plates here. If you're doing it solo, I like to install one beforehand just to get half of the system hanging up, and then you should be able to thread the other one in by yourself. If you're installing the Supercup system, the first thing you want to do is install our Fabspeed simulators. We use the studs coming from the body to assure a nice clean fitment. Then we can go ahead and just snug them up with two 13 mils. And with our system supported up in the air, let's go ahead and plug our valves back in. Then we'll take our cast muffler inlets and go ahead and pop those onto the system. We are going to leave them a little loose just to give adjustability for when we sync them up with the factory cats. Yeah, you know, as long as they're up in the car, you're good. Might as well throw your V-band clamps up there too. The final step before we put our headers in the car is to use a little bit of anti-seize on the studs. It really helps make future repairs and work easier. One thing to keep in mind when putting the header in is to make sure the bolt holes for this bracket are lined up nice. Next step, working from the inside of the header to the outside, we're going to go ahead and torque down the nuts. The spec is 26. I guess you could go a couple foot-pounds over to make up for the torque lost in the extension. And yeah, we're just going to tighten them down. I'm doing 28 here. Now that we've got both of our headers securely in place, we can go ahead and clamp it to the muffler. So we're going to go ahead and adjust this inlet here. Make sure it lines up. And go ahead and get our clamp around there. Then we're going to go ahead and run in the header bracket bolts. Then we have our heat shield for the right side header. When you go and put your O2 sensors back in, always make sure and use a little anti-seize on them. Otherwise, you will most likely run into problems down the road. These cars get very, very hot. You don't need too much, just a little bit. And a good way to remember which oxygen sensor is which, the blue wire is the primary sensor, and the black wire is the secondary. That's the general rule of thumb for most Porsches. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten up the AccuSeal clamps for the muffler inlets. Let's go ahead and do the final tightening on these backeting plates too. Now we're going to install our signature Fabspeed carbon fiber tips. It can take a while to get the alignment for them just right, but it's worth the effort to make the car look perfect. Now that we've got our tips on and straight, There's a couple things you want to do before putting the rear diffuser on. First is to start it up, check for leaks, make sure everything's tight and secure. And while it's running, just let it go for a couple minutes to build up heat. Then we're going to go back over all the nuts for the headers with the torque wrench again. That's called heat soaking and is critical for all Porsche header hardware. Now finally, we can go and throw the diffuser on and get it all buttoned up. Remember, you're going to start by sliding it onto the back bolts first. And with the diffuser on the car, you're good to go. Thank you for choosing Fabspeed, and see you out there on the road.